You feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at MAYAAkai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 50, a milestone for me, of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, the podcast that I like to say looks to embrace salient topics related to mental wellness from a fresh and forward-thinking perspective. Okay, maybe I'm patting myself on the back a little too much, but I do think I make it a little bit easier to kind of be engaged in these conversations because the focus of the podcast is to pull back that veil of self-doubt and sabotage that plagues so many of us in our lives, including me, to help us identify the ambitions and to harness that motivation to help us yield the satisfaction for that success we seek in our daily lives. Remember, the entire overarching theme of 2021 is focusing on your daily life, not the long term, because when you work on the short term, the long term tends to fall into place. So if you are a first-time listener or viewer, well, welcome. Buckle up for safety, I always say, not because it's not a safe space, but occasionally it can be an unexpected bumpy ride. I may say something that you just never really thought much about, and it kind of spurs a thought. And that's a good thing, because that's what it's about. It's about getting those wheels turning, challenging yourself to work to that best version of yourself. And of course, if you are a returning listener or viewer, well, welcome back. You are familiar with how we get down here, business as usual. Of course, I always say, everyone get your pencil, get your paper, get your beverage of choice. I'm doing iced coffee today. It's 5 o'clock someplace, so feel free to have a glass of wine, a beer, whatever it is that helps you to relax, sit back, and use the next 60 minutes for you. This is about you, time with me. Now, there is a rule you should know by now with the podcast. You are to work at your own pace. So if you're back in episode 35, because I can say I'm in episode 50 now, and you're really processing that episode, there is no time frame for you to move from it. Of course, I enjoy when you tune in every single week and join me timely, share, support, all that good stuff is good. But it's always important that you're in that space you need to be to work on the items that we're talking about here. So there is no time frame to this. So with that being said, this next 60 minutes, it's all about you, like I said. So get comfortable, find that place that's quiet, focus. Like I said, grab your beverage of choice, and let's jump into what is episode 50. I'm loving this of M.A.Y.A. And this is special delivery, the M.A.Y.A Mailbag, virtual mailbag show. I had gotten some really great responses from people, and I'm like, okay, it's episode 50. Let's make this all about the viewers. And there's definitely some burning questions. I've got questions from what I would call Miss Gemini. She's like, please help me to contain my inner Gemini because the situation is really pushing my buttons. I've got that midlife crisis question. I've got people feeling stuck. And the thing is, all these questions I feel can resonate with everybody. So I figured, why not make episode 50 all about the listeners, viewers, and let's use the mailbag is the way to do that. Of course, you can always join the conversation any point of time. If you're watching via Facebook or YouTube, all you have to do is just literally type something in the comment section, and just like this, I can click on it and share it with viewers. And if you happen just to be listening, I'll read it. So Vernon Fairley, who is always so faithful in supporting all of my endeavors, I greatly appreciate that. He said, on the next M.A.Y.A, the healing of PJ Tucker. That means he is chiming into, obviously, he knows that I do sports. By now, if you know me, you might know me purely from sports initially. I was at the Score at one point, then I was with WVON, and now I co-own the sports at the Sports Zone Chicago with Sean Sierra. So hopefully by now you have downloaded that because the shows there are quality. It's the best sports talk you'll get from real perspective, great guests from all outlets. It's always good stuff. Roburn is checking in. He is from Hawaii, so he always says, aloha, ma. Always great to have you aboard and appreciate the support. So that's how you can get involved in the show. Just type something in the comment section. And just like that, I will share it with all the listening audiences that are tuning in. Of course, by now, when you listen to episodes of M.A.Y.A, you can always listen via MAYAAkai.com. Of course, I always prefer you go there. With every episode, there is a podcast companion. So it means some supplemental information I've shared that I think can maybe give that episode a bit more depth and how you're kind of processing it. But you can always watch via YouTube as well or Facebook. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube page. It's MAYAAkai. So you can listen on MAYAAkai.com, but of course you can listen and watch via YouTube. Whichever works for you obviously works for me. Just make sure you subscribe, like, listen, and share. Of course, If you're listening to the podcast maybe a little bit later, not live when it airs, and I've kind of changed the time. I'm kicking the wheels on. I used to air at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, but I noticed at 3:30 I was kind of picking up some additional listeners. So I like to make things convenient and share it with more people. So I'm testing out a new time slot of 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time to see how this works out. But no matter what, you can always find episodes of Maya, of course, at MayaAkai.com, but iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify, whatever your podcast platform of choice is, just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and you can find episodes there. And lastly, as we wrap up our housekeeping for the show, I hope you've gotten social with me by now, which means you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Maya_Akai and Facebook at Maya Akai Presents are ways that you can obviously watch and listen to the show. So what do we always do? We have a pattern of behavior here. And I do believe that consistency and, help people to get comfortable with things. Repetition is a mother of learning. So a lot about the show is always very the same, and we won't vary from that. The content will vary, but how we start and end is always very consistent, because nothing else, we are working on consistency. It should be something that is in our toolbox. But what do we take out our toolbox first before we begin every show? We always pull out our EI, our emotional intelligence. It's something that when you go to bed, you put it away. When you wake up, it's the first thing you take out to start your day. And of course, emotional intelligence, everybody knows it's the way that you have the ability to perceive, obviously evaluate and control emotions, but not just yours. It's having insight into others, because ultimately we seek to respond and not to react to situations with most people. So that's the key thing. So make sure right now, if you did not have your EI out for the day, it's a little late. It's okay though, better late than never. Take out your EI and put it on the table, and we're going to use that obviously throughout the show. Now, another thing that I said became an overarching theme, and I think it really plays in today with all of the mailbag questions, is a quote that I feel kind of embodies everything that Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition is about. The quote, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Aristotle. So goes to show you that the idea of being self-aware is something that's not a new concept. It has existed for millennia, so to speak. That idea of being aware of who you are, the wisdom of self, begins that journey and travels to help you to be that best version of yourself. And that's something that we work on here on Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. So of course, I said with this being the 50th episode, I'm doing a couple things. I'm using the Maya virtual mailbag as the means to kind of be the basis for the show. I'm even using my AirPods, which by the way, I bought months ago and never really used. So hopefully this sounds good. And if it doesn't, somebody say, Maya, I really can't hear you really well. Whatever, because I'm trying my AirPods out for the first time after owning them for probably good to 5 months. I've never really used them. And I said, you know what? Let's take away the headphones and let's use something I bought. And why not use it for the 50th episode of Maya? So if there's any sound issues, please give me feedback. I like to know how it sounds with the AirPods, so to speak. All right. So we're going to use the Maya virtual mailbag to kind of be the navigator for this show. And if you remember, the mailbag is pretty straightforward. You can send me an email, which we call our virtual letters. And in that, you can kind of pose a question to me. Maybe something has been on your mind and, you're listening to an episode and it makes you think about something, or you have a question that episode's over. So you'd like to maybe get some more additional feedback. Then all you have to do pretty much is say, "Hey, Maya," in an email, "I am feeling stuck," or "You got me reflecting on this difficult situation. What's your thoughts on this?" I will respond to the email. But at the same time, if it's worthy of becoming a topic for an episode, then guess what? I'm going to punch the ticket and make it an episode. So I decided for the 50th episode of Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, why not make it the mailbag? I had gotten plenty of emails with questions. I would throw one in. I try to do it every episode, but this time I decided to dedicate an entire episode to it. So we're using the Maya mailbag. I love this. And there are some good ones. The first one I figure out, I had to come out the gates with it because it was the perfect example of something that I think a lot of people have experienced. And I myself have been right there. And how I would choose to handle it does not mean that's the way you have to handle it. There's one thing you must remember about this show. This is not me giving you advice about how to handle your life. It's about giving you insight to use as you reflect on situations you may be in. But by no means how I might do something does not mean how you would do something. But it is to help to give you some tools to help to navigate maybe those difficult situations and or to work on the trajectory you want to put yourself emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, spiritually, whatever the case may be. It's more about helping you to create a roadmap, but it's not to give you the answers. So please don't ever do something and then say, "Well, M.A.Y.A said, because M.A.Y.A didn't say. I want to be clear about this. Even within therapy, when you work with clients, we are not there to tell you what to do. And a lot of people go into therapy believing that. A therapist is there to help you to gather the tools and the insight to be able to deal with the situations that you are faced with. But you are the one that do the heavy lifting. The only thing a therapist really does for you is to make sure that your form is good and that you're doing the things the right way. So it can be advantageous for you. And a lot of people misunderstand what therapy is and get a little frustrated when a therapist won't just give them the answer, opposed to helping them to discover the answer. So that's a key thing. So here is about reflection and discovery. And I always say, if this gets too deep, this might be the cue that maybe I do need to talk to someone because I could use some additional work. And it starts with, it's here and it was simple, but now there's something else. Maybe I need to navigate with a therapist. And that's how it all, and this is what it's really all about here. So we're at our 50th episode, special delivery, the M.A.Y.A virtual mailbag. We have 4 virtual letters we're going to dive in today. And like I said when I started the show, this is a milestone show. It's episode 50. So I figured what better way to commemorate that is to take this moment and make it all about the listeners. So I pulled my mailbag out and I said, hey, let's go ahead and pull some of these letters out. So I've got some burning questions. The first letter is from someone who's really struggling with their Gemini nature. Then I've got, Mr. Feeling Stuck, in a midlife crisis, and there's some other engaging things there too. So with those correspondence, I decided to make this episode 50. So let's jump right into the virtual letter, the first one, Miss Gemini. I love my Geminis. Actually, most zodiac signs across the board are very interesting. Can I just tell you that? Some people say that's rubbish. I don't believe in it. You don't have to. Because one of the things that people need to learn in life is other people can believe in what they choose to believe in, and it's not for you to co-sign on it. And that goes vice versa. So you may not believe in this at all. And other people feel like, the whole zodiac thing, when I read my profile of what a Gemini is, I felt it was me. And I'll be honest, when I read what an Aquarius is, I'm very Aquarian in nature. Now, do I think it guides everything in my life? No. But for some reason, there happens to be some inklings of truth to it. Now, you may say, but are you looking for the truth to be there? It's always free to challenge and to pose the question. But either way, let's get into what Miss Gemini was asking. M.A.Y.A, I try to practice good behavior and emotional awareness when I respond to people when I get annoyed. I have someone who has invaded me and my fiance's space in our home. We let it slide. And now all I ask for this person to do at this point is to put away her items away neatly. We are currently in the process of buying the home we live in, and there are a lot of people in and out of the home at this time. My question is, how do I set boundaries, not curse this person out for not picking up their clothes and putting them away when I've asked multiple times? The Gemini in me is about to be a super biatch. That's what she said. That was her question. I didn't modify it. I just put it exactly the way that she put into her virtual letter to me. And remember, you can always do that as well. Send me a virtual letter to getinspired@mayakai.com. So that's Miss Gemini saying there's someone living with her and her fiance, and it's turning into be an issue for her. And she doesn't know how to deal with it without maybe being offensive in some way. So she said, how can I approach this? Because I've already done it once, but now I'm really agitated. So I'm trying to respond versus react. Well, I didn't just give a random question. I actually respond back to people's emails so I can get a better idea, because there are questions that I might need to pose to you to figure out kind of where you're going with this. So some things I would have to consider in this situation, and we went back on, as I said, well, what are the relationships dynamics with this person living with you? Is it someone you know? Is it your fiance's person? Is it a mutual friend? Like, what's the situation? And before you allow this to happen, did you really understand your boundaries? Because it sounds like you're learning your boundaries now, maybe after this situation has unfolded. Let me tell you this. Boundaries are extremely important. There's a whole episode committed to it. Knowing your physical, emotional, mental, all those boundaries. Sometimes you don't learn them until someone makes you cross them. And that's okay. Because mistakes are how we learn the most about ourselves and how we truly grow. If life was perfect and we never made mistakes, we'd never grow, we'd never change. And by the way, life would be boring as hell. Now, mind you, it depends on how big the mistake is, truth be told, if it's an issue. The other thing is, what was the initial arrangement when you allow this person to come and stay with you? And also then what particularly was the previous interactions in doing this? So these are all important things about how to approach the situation, to be clear about expectations in the next conversation that you had. So I asked this question to the person who sent me the virtual letter, and she responded back. So ultimately, the person is a relative of the fiance. So this is probably why it feels a little dicey because, whenever family gets involved, people always have a difficult time keeping it real sometimes when it's family, depending on the nature of the relationship. So that was the first thing. Two, the person asked to stay with them, but there was never the expectation it was going to be a long-term stay. This is where I would tell you, and I learned something really interesting about this as well, is having people stay with you. It's always important to establish what's the time frame and expectation of letting someone to come stay with you. Because if you don't know, Illinois law could be different in different states, can really put you in a pickle. If someone stays with you longer than 30 days, then technically they've established residency at your house. And most people don't know this, and this is the state of Illinois. You then almost have to treat them like a tenant and evict them, even though there is no signed lease. So it's important to kind of establish these things up front. What's the expectation? So there was no expectation this person was staying long term. It turned into that. So she's like, this is a 39-year-old woman who refuses to clean up after herself. That within itself can be very frustrating. So I said, have you actually had this conversation with your fiance about this really becoming an issue? Yes, she had. And he understands her level of frustration, also agrees he no longer wants the person to stay there. So there's a mutual understanding between the fiance and the person, Miss Gemini, who wrote the letter. So when they go to sit down and talk to this person, they are unified front. I felt that was very important because this was family. I'm going to tell you something when you have to approach people about something that's uncomfortable. You have to go into confrontations with people, and that's often what it is. It starts as a conversation and it turns into a confrontation. It tends to escalate that way when people are not ready to receive what you have to hear. So my insight to this was this. We would sit down and have a conversation with the person who was staying with us. At this point, the big question I asked was, do you want her to continue to stay with you when you purchase this property? And she said, no. I said, well, now is the time to determine it's time to make an exit plan. And it doesn't have to go on for months. So at this point, if you and your fiance decide we want her out in 35 or 40 days, it's fair. You're not saying, hey, I need you out right now, because they don't have a lease. This person just kind of was supposed to stay for a couple of days, and now it's turned into months. And it's turned into an inconvenience, and it's invaded their privacy. And remember, your home is your sanctuary. It's your space. And if you're at home and you feel like you're a prisoner in your own home, that's awful, because it's supposed to be the place you can come back to, and it's tranquil, and you can let your hair down and you can be you. But if you're dealing with somebody who's treading on that, that's a boundary issue right there. And even sometimes if you like people, it doesn't mean you want them to stay with you indefinitely. So they had to make a determination for the duration of time that they actually wanted her to stay. And they have to sit down and have the conversation with her and say, as you know, we are purchasing the home and we have lots of people coming in and out. I've had a conversation with you in the past about we really need to keep things neat because I want things to be presentable. It seems like we've kind of backslid on that. So I want to remind you of making sure you pick things up and put them away. But with that being said, we have talked about this, my fiance and I, and we are so looking forward to purchasing our first home together. And though we don't mind you staying with us, we're to a point where we didn't know this was going to be a long-term arrangement. It's important to state that when you came to stay with us, we didn't realize this was going to be a long-term arrangement. And this has kind of gone on longer than we thought. And though we do enjoy you, we kind of want our privacy and our space back because we're building a new life together. And we like to do that, just the two of us. So with that being said, do you have a plan on when you were expecting to leave? Now, that doesn't mean that person is determining it, but you want to see if they've even got the wheels turning about leaving. Chances are they probably have not, because they're comfortable in your space. So if they haven't, go, well, you haven't. Well, we have talked about this and we've determined, we would kind of like to move this forward at least maybe in the next 30 to 45 days, giving you time to find a place to move to and go on and forth. Is that something that seems feasible to you? Are you going to be ready to do that? And if they say, yes. Okay. So when you give a date to somebody, here's what's important. If you say 30 to 45 days, I would tell you, don't say 30 to 45, just be like 30 days. And then if you have to give a little extra time because they ask you for it, you can. But the important thing is, I'm trying to adjust my earbuds. See, I told you this is new for me. So I hope this doesn't mess up the sound. So if you can't hear me, say, hey, Maya, I can't hear you now. But what's important is that when you say I'm giving you 30 days, that 30 days has a definitive date. So for us, that 30 days, I'm just going to pull a date out. If today is, the 12th, then we'd be looking at September 12th would be the day that we would be expecting that you would be leaving the home. So that's the date we're all set on. Can we agree on this? Do you understand? If they say yes, okay, great. Keep us in the loop. Let us know what's going on. If there's any issues or problems, please keep us abreast. But this is something that is important that we're looking forward to moving forward to doing this. And, you feel free to add to the conversation. I hope this doesn't offend you. This is nothing about you personally. It's just we're in the process of building our life together, and we kind of want to have this experience. And we didn't expect that this was going to be a long-term endeavor. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't bring me pleasure to say this to you, but home is sanctuary, and we really want to work on this together. Here's the bottom line. What you just said would not be offensive. There is a probability the person will be offended. They won't see it from your point of view. It's okay. They don't have to. As long as you're respectful, giving time, and you leave open that door for communication, then you've done the right thing at that point. Don't worry about it. But I always tell people, these are difficult conversations, whether it be family or friends, because I have found myself in the same situation where I felt I wanted to do something, but I was so concerned about the other person being offended or hurting their feelings. But guess what? Down the road, it turned out to be a worse situation, and I should have followed my initial intuition. You have a right to have your space to yourself. And if you didn't enter into a lease or agreement for a long-term situation, then it doesn't have to be that. And that's how I told Miss Gemini, so that she said she doesn't have to let her Gemini bitch come out, as she said. I said, this is how you approach it as a response, opposed to reacting to how she's aggravating you. It's not easy when we're dealing with other people, because a lot of times if we're remotely trying to be good people, then we want to attempt to be accommodating. You can only be accommodating to a certain degree. And how you would be accommodating in this situation, Miss Gemini, would be not saying, pack your things and get out. You're giving time. You're giving respect. Now, here's the deal. If they're not financially in a place to deal with that, I hate to say this is really not your fault, because apparently something was going on before they got to you. So you don't have to feel pigeonholed like, well, this person can't. They'll probably figure someplace else to plant their feet. But what you don't have to do is make yourself more uncomfortable than you already been. And hopefully for you, this person will not play the card that I don't have to leave, because now you have a whole different situation. May the force be with you on that one. But either way, Miss Gemini, I appreciate the fact that you're trying to work towards using your emotional intelligence. You're looking to respond opposed to reacting. That tells me you're using the things in your Maya toolbox. I appreciate that. All right, let's move into virtual letter number 2, feeling lost. And you know what's interesting? We can have what we feel are really well put together lives and feel like things are going right, but it doesn't mean there's not times where sometimes we feel like we've gotten a bit off course. You feel lost. And this is what a person kind of reached out to me to share, is having that feeling. So this is what feeling lost said to me in the letter that they wrote. Maya, I listen to your show regularly, and I truly am trying to get to the best version of myself. Yet at times I feel lost in knowing what the best version of me means. Where do I start feeling lost with myself? You know, it's interesting because you have to know that the idea of self-help is not a new concept. It goes back more than 50 years. And it was definitely cutting edge back then. And it wasn't even that type of society. And it was something that was more of a US-based concept. So the idea of self-help and self-awareness are generally newer ideas to us, but the foundation has been laid for a very long time. So let's be honest, most of us within our support networks, which generally speaking, usually is our families, no one is kind of giving you that guidance to say, let's focus on what is it you really want? What's the best version of you? Because to be honest, our parents didn't get that kind of necessarily guidance from their parents, and their parents didn't get it from theirs. So this might be something that you are laying down a fresh foundation on within yourself that may extend into your friend and family groups that most people never experienced. So the first thing is, don't beat yourself up if you have no idea what the best version of you looks like, because that's all part of the process. So before you can get to the best version of yourself, you have to really explore, who am I? You know, and sometimes we tend to ask ourselves that question when we feel lost. But I would tell you to ask yourself that question on a frequent basis, especially when you feel maybe something challenges you or questions who you feel you are, or you do something you feel is out of character. Like, you know something, that's really not me. And when you say that, then say, well, if it's not me, then why did I do it? That's the real conversation. If it's not you, then why did you do it? Because maybe you might have a come to Jesus moment about yourself about, well, maybe it is partially you. You just don't admit that that's a part of your personality that maybe you're not really pleased with. So that first question you have to explore is, who am I? What defines you? Asking what defines you. And the next question would be, why does it define you? There's a whole episode about core values. And I keep telling people, go back to it. I don't know what number it is because I'm up to episode 50 now. So I stopped keeping track of them. And a lot of times I'm kind of rehashing some of these episodes to give them more depth because I've gotten questions from people. So some may be similar, but it's not going to be the same. But the real thing is the core values is what's going to drive who you are. What matters to you? Is it family? Is it friend networks? Is it work? Is it social, cultural issues? And if it's something that matters to you, why? A lot of times you have to ask yourself this question. Does something matter to you because you really have a vested interest in it? Or does it matter to you because it mattered to somebody else who you looked up to and respected, and you kind of absorb that into part of who you are? It doesn't mean that it doesn't matter, but how authentic is it really to you? Often as young adults, children, adolescents, we really absorb our familiar structures around us and our friend groups and our peers, and it becomes part of who we are. But at some point, it's okay to purge if you have an experience that resonates with you, and it may even conflict with something that you felt was really you. It happens all the time. It's a growth process. And that's why the whole process of reconciliation is so important when you are working on the best version of yourself. Like, I was really gung-ho for this, but I had this experience that really was an awakening for me. And this doesn't resonate with me anymore, but I thought it was me. Hey, it's okay to decide you're going to have a shift in who you are. It doesn't mean fundamentally you're going to be entirely different. I have seen that happen to people though. But I will tell you this, a lot of those people that I saw had a fundamental shift away from who they were because of an experience, and they were so enmeshed in the experience, they did find their way back closer to center, only to say, I have no idea what that was all about. It's okay. It was a growth point. It was an experience that now you have something to work on. Like, yeah, I did that once and found out that really wasn't my cup of tea, so to speak. So experience are the thing that really make us grow. Mistakes are the things that help us to grow. But you really won't know that unless you start to opening yourself up to new things. But it doesn't mean you have to negate your core values. 2, when I said what matters to you, family, friends, and be honest about it. Let's be honest. Some people don't have great family situations, and they really have a network of friends that feel more like family. So those become more tight-knit relationships that they value. Remember last week was about high value relationships, and that's okay. So if you truly value friendships more than you do the whole concept of family, maybe you're putting a new spin on the idea of what family is. We talked about extended families. There's nuclear families. There's blended families. There's all kinds of ideas of family. You can create that space for yourself. Whatever feels like family for you, you get to own that. And other people don't get to tell you that it can't be that. And a lot of times people are eager to tell you who you should be or why you should be. So if it's family, friends, work, or social, cultural, whatever it is, ask yourself, why does this matter to me? So here's the thing. This may sound really bad. Do you push so hard to make family work because that's something that was passed on to you? Hey, blood is thicker than water. You don't ever forsake your family. That's a great sentiment. But let's be honest. If your family doesn't act like family and they don't treat you like family, you can miss me with that blood is thicker than water stuff, because that means I'm giving you a space emotionally and mentally that you do not value, but you want me just to value it based on this is a core value that you are accepting and you are driving. And a lot of people are very fearful about challenging bad relationship dynamics in families. So I'm going to tell you something. When people look at you like blood is thicker than water and don't do this and that, I'm going to tell you something. If that leads you down a bad path, or you don't feel like the family members that are selling that to you, blowing smoke like big time, they're not reciprocating that sentiment to you, don't feel like you have to own that and make it part of who you are unless it's real. It's authentic. Some people have true, authentic families, and I've seen it. And I've seen other people where it's fake as all get out, and they're trying so hard to make it work. Be honest for what it is. The next thing, figuring out who am I in this, feeling lost about finding that best version of yourself. What goals have you set for yourself and why? So my thing is this, and a lot of times I say this goes back to early exposure as children. Did you decide to become a physician because it was your passion? Or did a parent plant that seed in your head that you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a physician, you're going to be this, and maybe you really wanted to be a rock star, whatever. And did you end up following somebody else's path and passion because that's what you were put on? But now you're at a certain point in your life and you find no joy and happiness in what you're doing because somebody else put you on this path. It's okay to say, now, mind you, if you invested a lot of time and energy and it's something that's been valuable, it's kind of hard to walk away from something just because now you don't feel as happy with it. But I've seen people do it. I've seen people literally switch careers and become lawyers and doctors later in life because that's what they really wanted. Maybe someone told you you're not smart enough to be a doctor or a lawyer. And so you decided to go do something else. But you realize as you became older and more mature and you got in touch with you start listening to your inner voice. You're like, hold up, wait a minute. I can do anything that I put my mind to. That's something I've always known it. We hear these stories all the time about following somebody else's life path. And all of a sudden you discover that it wasn't for you. And they go back and they become centered with who they are and pursue their dream. And the happiness is different. So what are the goals have you set? And the question is, did you set those goals for you or did somebody else? And if you set those goals for you, why did you set them? Something else I would tell you as you're exploring who am I, ask yourself, what do you spend most of your time focusing on, as well as putting your energy into, and why? So do you find that you put a lot of time and energy into work, not so much because you enjoy it, because the expectation is you're exceptionally good at what you do, and so you work really hard at it, even though it does nothing for you, and you feel like it defines you? You put time and energy into things that really don't resonate and bring you happiness. You have to explore that. And here's one that's always a good litmus test, and people hate it, but it's an interesting way to kind of give yourself a barometer of what's going on with you. How do people see or perceive you? Do they see you as being strong, outspoken? Do they see you as being lazy, indecisive? Let's be honest. We know when people have negative thoughts about us, but the thing that's interesting, thank you for tuning in, Steve McNeil. I must have said something that resonated. He gave me the fist. But seriously, how people perceive you, by the way, doesn't mean that's who you are, but there is something about you they know. Now, mind you, I'm going to tell you something you got to be mindful of, especially when you're dealing with human beings. I always tell people I'd be happier in a room full of cats unless there's two people in the room that I can really, really connect with. Connections are everything for me. And I don't have a lot of friends. And it's not because I'm not personable. It's just because for me, my connections with people run deep emotionally and mentally. And I get really disappointed when I invest in people and I was wrong. I was like, wow, I kind of thought I thought there was something there, but it's okay. You learn, you live, you learn. But I'm going to tell you something about when you are using other people to kind of get a feel for who you are. Don't think for one moment that who they say you are is who you are. Because sometimes people can be spiteful, can be selfish, can be jealous, and they themselves are not grounded in who they are. So they can't really give you a good reflection of you because their own reflection is poor. I will tell you this. You will know this about people. And I'm going to tell you, I had a recent experience where something didn't go well. And though everything initially seemed okay, when the cookie crumbled, I became the worst person in the world. Prior to that, I was good as gold. But I realized that worst person thing that they were trying to throw at me was coming from a place of anger, hurt, disappointment. It wasn't who I was. But if I wasn't grounded who I was as a person, I might have absorbed some of that and been like, really? But I realized who I was dealing with. And I was like, okay, well, that's unfortunate you feel that way. And understand this. I didn't engage that person back with the negativity, though they were looking for it. And understand, we all have at least an ounce of petty in us. I chose to take the high road. I tell people that being in mental health, being a therapist has made me a better person. It has helped me to walk the walk of what I share with people. Now, do I do it perfect? No. Oh, goodness, I make tons of mistakes all the time. But the thing is, when I do it, I seek to learn from it. Like, no, why did I do that? Okay, all right. And I reflect on it. So I don't do anything or say anything on the show that I don't do myself. I feel like as we set out on a mental wellness journey, I am traveling with you. Now, I feel like I'm giving insight on things, but you never stop growing or learning. And if you do, that's when you often can become stagnant. So just know when you're feeling lost, it's important to ask yourself that big question, who am I? Because that's important, because if you can't really answer it, that's often where issues come in. Let's have our first real talk time of the show. Do you take the time to really self-evaluate? That means reflect on who you think you are versus who you want to be. And if so, what is the disconnect versus the difference? That's true self-reflection. So if you say, right now, this is who I am. This is who I would like to be. Where's the disconnect or the difference? A disconnect would be, Who you are right now is nothing like who you want to be. Because that means obviously, and you're living in your moments and making your present choices, you are not doing things that resonate at the core of who you want to be. And the question is why. The difference is there is some strong correlation between who you are and who you want to be. But there's some differences where you need to work on some self-improvement to get to that best version of yourself. That's key. I would tell yourself every single month, self-reflect and sit down, write it on paper, start with looking at yourself in the mirror and say, who am I? Where am I at right now in my life? And where do I want to be? And start noting the differences. And then when you note the differences, because hopefully that's where we are right now, then you start making the master plan. How can I get to that place where I want to be? And getting to that spot, by the way, doesn't mean that's your final destination, because life is a journey. And until it's over, you're going to continue to grow, change, challenge, and get to new positions in life. So don't get comfortable, because when you get comfortable, that's when things tend to make you feel stuck, which is another question down the road. One of the best things I heard from Father Eric with the prayer. He's a chaplain at where I work at. Love his prayer that he does overhead. I listen. But when we had a moment of silence for Black Lives Matter, he said something that really hit me hard. He said, enemy. He goes, good is the enemy of great. Because good often means comfortable and complacency. Great means you're always working hard. You never stop. You never settle. It doesn't mean you can't be in the moment, and it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it, but you just don't settle. You enjoy it, you savor it, because remember, we're all about being in the moment. But don't get too comfortable, complacent that you start to lose focus on what your long-term goals are. That's why it's important to have short-term goals, which we work on a daily basis, would help to build towards long-term goals. So if your long-term goal, for instance, when you start working your first job and you say, I want to buy a property, then there's a thing that's going to go in place. Saving money, looking at your credit, doing all these things are going to help you to get to that destination. We often don't look at mental wellness that way because it's something that is not necessarily tangible. Concrete things are often easier to focus on and work towards than things that are tangible. Materialistic things can help you to focus more so than things that have no physical form. That's when you're working at a higher level. When you can start achieving goals for the non-physical things, those metaphysical things that exist, that's when you know you're operating at a higher level emotionally and mentally. Let me just tell you that. When you're like, I have a goal that I want to have better emotions. I want to work on my emotional intelligence. I want to start responding and reacting. And the thing is, when you start doing it, you're going to know you did it. You're going to be like, that person really just tried to push my buttons. And I just stepped back, listened, and said, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's something that's hard to do than something that's more concrete. Just know that. This is why mental wellness is a challenge for so many people. So real talk, do you take the time to really self-evaluate, reflect on who you think you are versus who you want to be? And then when you do that, if who you are is slightly different than who you want to be, then there's a difference and you can work on the in-between. But if who you are and who you want to be are miles apart, there's a disconnect, you got to stop and figure out why there legitimately is a disconnect. Alrighty, buddy, let's take a quick break. And we're going to open up 2 more letters in the mailbag that kind of dig a little bit deeper and they kind of are connected. This is episode 50 of Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. This is special delivery. We broke open the mailbag, and this is all about listeners, what listeners are thinking, what's on their minds. We had Miss Gemini who had a situation and she was trying to hold back her inner Gemini because she didn't want to go the wrong route. And we had, feeling stuck and figuring out what the best version of them look like. We dove into some really key things here. We got 2 more on the other side of the break that I think will be equally as interesting. Sit tight, and we'll be right back after this break.
You may not realize it, but these words, often used to describe someone with a mental health condition, can be very harmful. In a country where 1 in 5 people are affected by a mental health condition, it's time for all of us to step up and change the conversation. Just because someone's struggle isn't obvious on the outside doesn't mean they aren't hurting on the inside. We need to see the person, not the condition. Join with me, pledge to be stigma-free.
Please stop and listen because this important message may directly apply to you or someone dear to you. Several thousand African American former full-time CPS teachers were unfairly terminated starting in the mid-90s and continuing to the 2000s. If you are one of those many former CPS teachers who was unjustly terminated, or if you are the immediate relative of a now deceased unjustly terminated former CPS teacher, you may qualify to participate in a lawsuit at no upfront cost to you. Please call 773-580-7183 immediately for more information. That's 773-580-7183. Do not delay. Act today, because time is of the essence. That's 773-580-7183. 773-580-7183.
I can't breathe. I have migraines, numbness, weight loss. I live with it every day. The illness that I'm suffering from is an anxiety disorder, and it deserves to be treated like any other illness. But it's not.
You've served our country and made us proud. Many of you have come home, continue to lead, and look out for one another. So it's important we all learn the 5 signs of emotional suffering. If you or someone you know is experiencing one or more of these signs, reach out, connect, offer to help.
Hey, what's the matter?
In or out of uniform, we can help our families and nation stay strong. Visit changedirection.org.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.
All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 50. Special delivery, the M.A.Y.A virtual mailbag. I figured why not make a milestone episode all about the listeners. So I get all kinds of, emails from people that have specific questions about things that I think are legitimately, relevant questions. And I always feel like you're not the only person who's feeling this way. You're not the only person who's had these kind of issues. And I think often when we realize that we're not alone in our personal struggles is when we tend to do better. And often people are willing to commit more because of that. So you too can also get involved. Remember, you can just send me an email, as we said, our virtual letter. Just send it to getinspired@mayakai.com and I will respond. And if what you say, I think, is a pertinent question, a burning question that I think can really benefit other viewers to hear this as well, then I'm going to share it maybe as a virtual mailbag letter in the beginning of an episode, or I might just say, well, hell, this is actually worthy of a full episode. So make sure you get involved and you can send me a virtual letter at getinspired@mayakai.com. So we're in episode 50, special delivery, M.A.Y.A, the virtual mailbag. Let's have a toolbox time. And this is funny because I thought long and hard about before I made the decision to make this the tool that should be in your toolbox, your M.A.Y.A toolbox. But I said, you know something? Let's not make the assumption that people always get this and that they're always using it as they should. So this is a subtle reminder, a gentle nudge of how important this tool is going along with your emotional intelligence. The honesty tool. I know, right? You're like, what? Honesty. But I feel like people struggle with honesty. Look, if telling the truth or being honest was easy, people wouldn't lie. Let's just call it what it is. Honesty, basic Webster dictionary definition, the adherence to facts and the fairness and straightforwardness of conduct based on facts. That's straightforward, to the point. That's honesty. So my thing is this: when you're dealing in situations, it's important that first you are honest with yourself. Honesty with self supersedes everything else. If you messed up, if you made a bad decision, own it. Accountability is huge. And remember, we did a whole episode, like I think episode 48 was about the art of the apology, understanding it. An apology is never issued because you're expecting forgiveness. It's about accountability for your actions. more than anything else. So being honest with yourself is where the best version of you journey really begins. Like, I'm gonna be real talk. I'm not feeling me. This is not the person I want to be. So why do I keep doing it? What's pigeonholing me? What's my ball and chain on this? Why do I keep living at a level that I don't feel like respectfully is who I am as a person? What's holding me back? Be honest. Is it family? Is it friends? Or here's one better. Is it you? Often in life, we are our worst enemies. We are our biggest obstacles, but it's so easy to pander to, oh, well, if I would have had this. At some point, you got to stop saying, if I would have had, and say, I didn't, but now I'm this. I am now the architect. I am now the architect of what is the construction of me, the final product, the vessel. And the hardest thing to do is to own that, because it now means you're taking responsibility for you and you're not putting it in somebody else's plate. Trust me, that's a real uncomfortable feeling when you decide to be accountable for you and you don't put the blame or the responsibility in someone else's hands. And some people never make that journey. I'm gonna tell you that, because it's work. It's a lot of work. So honesty, it's a big thing. How much do you honestly use it in your toolbox? No pun intended. When you're leading with emotional intelligence, we're talking about being able to evaluate and perceive. You must do all of that with honesty and objectivity. Because if you're not, you're failing to really do the things to help you to get to the best version of yourself. All right. So honesty is a tool that if we didn't talk about, now we have. So when you're taking out that EI, make sure your objectivity and your honesty is on the table with it as well. All right, let's jump into our third letter that came into the M.A.Y.A virtual mailbag. The self-advocacy struggle is real. And I know that it is. I'm gonna tell you something. Self-advocacy is a journey. And we often don't start it until a little bit later in life when we really understand what it means to find our inner voice, to be connected with ourselves. And I do understand that it's complicated, because when it's all said and done, self-advocacy is difficult. So here's what the letter said. Hi, M.A.Y.A. Love the show. By the way, I love how you guys always give me this a little bit of, shine first. I appreciate that. You don't have to, though. You can go right to it, but I'll take the shine. I'm not going to say it's a bad thing. But it said, hi, M.A.Y.A. Love the show and your direct approach to a lot of mental wellness challenges. The episode about self-advocacy was one that really resonated with me. I have a habit of taking care of others and putting their needs and desires before mine, especially in what I consider to be high-value relationships, i.e., that was last week's episode about understanding high-value relationships. How do I change this pattern of behavior that is all that I know and have ever done in important relationships? A lot of people are guilty of this. I'm going to tell you that, putting others before ourselves. And the thing is, when people don't do it, they instantly get pegged as being selfish. Now, mind you, you do have to observe what they're being selfish about. But if they are looking at what their needs are, but they're not neglecting yours, and that's not being selfish. Sometimes when people don't do 100% what we want, we feel they're selfish. The other thing would be, well, did you bother to express what you need? The one thing I want people to stop doing in 2021, for real, is stop behaving like people know what you want and need and what's on your mind. Tell them. So there is no gray area, because I've been clear to you about, this is something I really need, or this is an expectation I have, or I would desire this. Don't expect for someone to know that because you feel like that's etiquette and manners. You know what? This is exactly where people get into quagmire all the time, because you assume that someone, if they're a good person or if they're emotionally intelligent, they should know. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't want to make an inference that's not correct. So it's important that you're able to express yourself. And this is where self-advocacy comes into the picture. There was something in the episode we did about self-advocacy, and I can't remember exactly what episode it was, but this was something that I shared. And it pretty much shared what self-advocacy is, and it's important to really understand it. Self-advocacy is the ability, and this is the first key point, to articulate one's needs and then make informed decisions about the support necessary to meet those needs. Let me read it to you again. Self-advocacy is the ability to articulate one's needs and make informed decisions about the support necessary to meet those needs. Think about that for a moment. So this is where a lot of people struggle, because they articulate about what you need to make it happen. That means once I figured out what my needs are, I need to be able to tell you. But the thing about support is, are you asking the right person for what you need? A lot of times we have expectations of people and they can never meet them. Maybe they can't meet them because they're emotionally not there. Maybe they can't meet it because they're financially not there. Maybe they can't do it because they're mentally not there. But you need to be aware, if you're asking something of someone they can't give you, don't get upset about it. But if you don't have a candid conversation about if something has a shortcoming and you don't understand why it has a shortcoming, you got to step back and look at that person and say, are they just being selfish and refusing to meet me where I'm at and my needs emotionally and mentally, or can they not do it with me? You got to be able to ask yourself that question. What did I tell you? Do not move backwards to meet people where they're at, unless you moving backwards in some way is possibly advantageous for you. 1, 2, it's not going to cause you duress or harm by taking steps back, or 3, it's not going to impact you in any way. So my thing is, if you got to move backwards to deal with somebody and you call this a high value relationship, something's not right. And you have to be willing to acknowledge that. Now, if it's going to be, I'm going to meet you in the middle, which means maybe I take 3 steps back, you take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Paula Abdul. Anyways. Oh, I haven't sang in a while. You're probably like, please don't do it again. Anyways, but seriously, that means we got to have a meeting of the minds and the hearts, which means I'm willing to take 3 back if you'll take 3 forward. Or maybe it's vice forward. Maybe you're the person that's not where you need to be in that particular relationship, and you need to take the risk and take 3 steps forward for them to take 3 steps back, so you can meet in a mutual ground. But that's the thing about self-advocacy. Here's what you have to understand about it. Self-advocacy takes courage and consistent effort towards being authentic and true to yourself. Remember what the whole overarching quote for the year is? Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, Aristotle. That's what this encompasses. That's what it's all about. It takes courage to articulate what you need, usually not what you want. People will tell you what they want in the heart rate, but can never tell you what they need, because half the time they don't know, because people think that desires and wants are the most important thing. And then when needs aren't met, they wonder why things aren't going right. So here's some things I want you to think about, especially if you are struggling with self-advocacy and what you consider to be a high value relationship. And I know that's a term that's really being thrown around a lot. Do me a favor, go back and listen to the last episode, 49. Because I think I kind of nailed it and talked about value of relationships, just not high value, but understanding values of relationship, high to middle to low. Here's some things I want you to chew on when you're struggling with self-advocacy and relationships that matter to you. 1, if you deem a relationship high value and it's not mutual in regards to respect, accommodation, and regarding the time and contribution you put into it, the problem is bigger than self-advocacy. Because if you are feeling, when a person truly appreciates you, they celebrate you. They let you know you're appreciated. I'm going to tell you something. That's a life lesson. We learn how to really cherish and respect people over time. It might be losing somebody because you made a bad decision. It may be losing someone because they're no longer here. But you learn the value of relationships, and the appreciation part comes when you are a person who is truly empathetic. Not sympathetic, but empathetic. But even people who are empathetic have to be careful that you don't extend yourself too much, because you're giving, but you're not making a person meet you in the middle. That's important. So if you're valuing a relationship and you're saying it's high, but they're behaving like it's low, that's why you can't self-advocate, because you know they don't value the relationship the same way. Call it like you see it and step back and say, well, if I'm putting it on high and you acting on low, I'm about to knock this down to low right with you. Can you have the emotional smarts to do that? That's the thing. It's that emotional intelligence. Seriously, that's work. That's operating on a whole nother level. Seriously. And a lot of people they struggle with that. 2, if you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything and accept anything. So seriously, if you don't know who you are and what you stand for, chances are you will never be able to self-advocate, because you don't know exactly what you're advocating for. And that's why the person who said before they're struggling with finding what the best version of them looks like, often it's hard to self-advocate if you're not sure what you're speaking to or what you're speaking for. And that's what people have to learn. Real talk. Even me, I have had some of the most immerseful life experience in the last 12 months than I have ever had, that have really poised and positioned me, I feel like, to have the best version of myself I could have. I've been challenged. I've had loss. I've had people treat me in disrespectful ways. I've had people take me for granted. And the thing is, if you know me, you'd be like, what? You, Maya? But I told somebody, it's a growth point and you got to step back and evaluate. That's the key thing. These last 12 months for me have been amazing for growth. Reflect on your last 12 months and what they have been for you. And by the way, I'm not even talking about COVID. Not at all. That's a whole nother subset of things for me that I thrived during COVID. I didn't struggle. So it's been my life lessons in the last 12 months that for me have positioned me to now have the best life moving forward. The third thing I want you to think about when you talk about finding self-advocacy, because this is what this third letter was about, was, hey, I'm really struggling legitimately to self-advocate. I want you to think about, ask yourself this question. Think about it, then ask yourself this question. What are you truly afraid of if you decide to speak up for yourself? Is it rejection? Is it going to be confrontation and you're not a confrontational person in nature? Maybe you're a little passive aggressive. You don't like confrontation. Or is it you thought, if I speak up for myself, this person, I might lose the relationship? Well, I'm going to tell you something. If putting yourself in difficult situations where you don't feel your needs are being met, you feel you're being taken for granted, you don't feel celebrated, you don't feel appreciated, if not being able to say that means you have to suffer in silence, again, this is not a high value relationship. And you have to ask yourself, why am I here? What is the value I have assigned to this relationship that I'm afraid to advocate for myself because my needs are not being met, my wants aren't being met, or maybe something is missing, but I'm afraid if I say something, it's going to be a problem. That's not a healthy relationship to be in. There's a whole episode about communication. Go back and listen to that. Because you should be able to advocate for yourself without feeling it's going to come with a negative consequence if it's a high value relationship. Now, if you're walking with one of those low or middles, then maybe it's going to be like that. It might be like they may reject what you say. They may not meet you. They may become confrontational because high level relationships, and we know them when we have them, high value relationships, people respond to you differently because the connection is different. So maybe you're overvaluing a connection, but it's very one-sided. Just think about that. That's some stuff that I think people don't really understand that they have to think about. Let's have another real talk time. The second one and the last one of the show. And this is going to be a toughie, but it's real. You need to ask yourself this question. If you're afraid to find that inner voice and to advocate for yourself, do you truly value yourself in the relationship that you have with the most important one that you have? You. Because I'm going to tell you something. When you value you in a relationship, the relationship you have with yourself, you are less likely to let people to abuse you because you appreciate you. You know the work. You know who you are as a person. So when someone comes at you sideways because something didn't work out and all of a sudden they want to talk negative you and say bad things about you, when you know who you are, sometimes you can just say, that's really unfortunate you feel that way, because you know who you are. You can be like, it's unfortunate you feel that way, but hey, it is what it is. And you're not afraid to walk away because you realize at the core of who you are, that there's value and you bring value to any relationship you interact in. So again, if you believe this legitimately is a high value relationship, but you can't find that voice to tell somebody you're not happy or not getting what you need, I'm gonna go back and ask you, do you truly value yourself in the relationship you have with yourself? Because when you value you, you will protect yourself through and through. You will not let people abuse you. Only when you don't value yourself and have that self-esteem you have, you can't find that voice because you're afraid. And that's what I have to say. 2 questions, ask yourself, is this really a high value relationship? And 2, do I value me in my most important relationship, which is with me? And if it's no to that last question, because that's the most important one, step back and get back to doing that work about who am I? That's what's key. This has been quite the a merciful episode 50. I'm loving this mailbag stuff. It's getting me all fired up and it's good questions. But let me just tell you this about self-advocacy before we move on to our final letter in this particular episode. What you need to know about self-advocacy, it begins with self-awareness. And that's why I said, if you don't know who you are, if you don't value that relationship with you, then you're not going to be able to really express yourself and what you need to others. You have to know how you feel about you, how you value and respect yourself. Once you find that space, the energy will follow. So if you're struggling with finding that inner voice, I'm going to tell you something. when you become self-aware, when you know how you feel about yourself, when you find that self-respect, when you find that self-esteem, when you value you, when you respect you, when you fall into that space, that energy about being your advocate for yourself, it will follow and it will be powerful when it happens. When people have awakenings, I'm gonna tell you what's funny too. Sometimes they go a little overboard with it. Because they get so untouched and they've been so used to being in negative situations, being taken advantage of, they kind of get an all or nothing attitude about stuff. And that's not healthy either. So be mindful when you're advocating that. I'm not saying that when you are speaking to what you need, it doesn't mean you disregard other people. That's why you have to know the nature of the relationship that you're in. And are you putting expectations on something that's not appropriate for that relationship? That was the last episode. Go check it out. All right, let's jump into the fourth and final letter of this episode. And this is one that I think everybody's going to experience at some point of time. So this particular letter said, Maya, I'm reaching out to you because I'm feeling stuck. So that's why I call this Mr. Feeling Stuck in the Middle with You. You know, that Steelers Wheel, it's a song, Stuck in the Middle with You. Love that song. Anyways, but it says, I'm reaching out to you because I'm feeling stuck. Have been for the past 3 to 4 years. The recent quarantine with COVID really brought a lot of this to light. I now feel I have a job that is okay, it provides, and I live comfortably. I'm in a 10-year marriage that is not abusive or bad, just boring, and I often feel alone. I know the world is opening back up, and the idea of resuming my daily life, though, it still seems like it's going to be unsatisfying, often suffocating. I'm truly stuck in this midlife crisis. They put a question mark behind it. You know, it's interesting because a lot of people kind of get to this point where they feel stuck. And this is where I tell people that amazing saying that Pastor Eric said, that good is the enemy of great. Be mindful of that. There's a couple of things I want you to think about when you're feeling stuck. Ask yourself these questions. Where are you? Where do you want to be? But here's the one that's interesting. Where do you think you would be? So sometimes we're in spaces and we're like, well, I'm here. Not exactly where I want to be. I thought I'd be here. A lot of times we're in life, sometimes we're ahead of where we thought we might be or we're behind. And there's lots of circumstances that legitimately play into that. So what you have to ask yourself when you're asking where you are, where you want to be versus, where would you like to be? Ask yourself this question. How do these life, as I would call them, demarcation points differ? So this is when you start asking yourself stuff like, what was your vision when you imagined where you would be in life? Did you really have one? A lot of times we just kind of proceed forward and doing things. I mean, did you really take the time to imagine it? Did you, vision, I want to do this? A lot of times people say stuff like, I want to be married. I want to have kids. But being married and having kids has a whole lot of different looks to it. I don't know if people know that. It might be, did that mean, like, say, for instance, if you're female, does that mean that you wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and you want to get married and have kids and not have a career? Or did that mean you maybe wanted to be a career woman and wanted to have kids, but you need somebody who can be equally yoked? Or what happens if you really make a lot of money and can be the breadwinner? Would you be comfortable with your significant other being at home? These are a lot of things. Often when we first start out in our life's journey, we don't necessarily know these things, and that's okay. So where you might be right now may have never been by some master plan or design, because we grow and we change and life throws us curves. But I think it's important to know that if marriage and children were important to you, you knew it was something of high value that you wanted to have. Now, what it might look like could be different. You may end up finding out you couldn't have children. So now you had to adopt, and that might be different. A lot of people come down that path and didn't realize that's where they were going to be. Some people all of a sudden couldn't have children and decided just to not have children at all. And they have to be like, am I okay with this? And sometimes they fill that void with something else. So our life paths are not always laid out. They're not. So that's why I said, how does your demarcation point differ for, where you are, where you thought you would be, opposed to where you want to be? The other thing is, and this has come up in almost every letter, Is your vision where you thought you would be, was that your vision or someone else's? So was the early part of your life, and we've kind of talked about this in some other episodes, was it someone set you on that path and you walked it and you liked it? Or did you start walking down a path and didn't even know that that's where you were going, but you still enjoyed it, but it was something different? So I always think it's important when you talk about vision, is where you are now, was this your vision or was it somebody else's? And if it wasn't your vision, and you continue to perpetuate it, are you okay with it? Or can you make it a shift within it that can get you to where you would like to be? Can it be adjustable for you at this point? These are things you have to ask your plan. Let's be honest. Most of us did not plan our lives out. We kind of just tended to go with the flow, with the occasional change or upgrade along the way. I don't think that's bad, being flexible or being able to kind of make adjustments as things change. If you were to ask me would I be doing this right now, I'm not exactly sure. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to work in mental health. I can tell you that. Matter of fact, I was adamant that's not where I was going to be. Though I always had this love affair for broadcasting, I studied it in college and undergrad. The path I got to where I am, I had no idea this was going to be where I was going to be. And to be honest, if I could go back and change some things, I would kind of tweak some things. And maybe I would be in a different spot from a standpoint of maybe what I would be doing. But I never saw myself as, I'm going to be this amazing broadcaster. I'm not saying I'm an amazing broadcaster, so don't misunderstand that. That was never part of how I saw myself. But the thing is, I'm okay with where I am. Now, the point of my life, I would tell you that differs, but I also think it fell in line with my thought pattern. I didn't really think I would have children. And ironically enough, I didn't. I wasn't opposed to having children, but I kind of didn't think I was going to have children. It wasn't something of importance to me. So here's how it worked. When people say, can I ask you why you don't have kids? And my response is always this, especially in dating. I said, well, you know something? Kids weren't like a high priority for me, but it wasn't like I was opposed to having children if I was with someone and we had children. And that's how I was open to it. So it just turns out the fates just did not deal me the parent card. They probably knew something that I didn't know. So that's the thing. I kind of think I fell in line with that, and it's okay. And I'm comfortable with that. But something for me that does have a difference is, for me, the idea of companionship and family in that sense is something that I strongly desire. But I also realize it takes work to get to that. So am I at where I want to be in that particular part of my life? No. But I also realize I want a healthy, solid relationship, which takes work and often the right person, to tell you the truth. So there's a journey in that. So in some parts of my life, I'm hitting exactly where I want to be, and others I'm not. So I know where I need to focus my energy, but overall, I'm pleased. And if that's what you come out in your evaluation in your life, there's nothing wrong with that. So it doesn't have to be picture perfect. It doesn't have to fit somebody else's timeline. That's why you should stop rushing people like, when are you getting married? Or when are you going to have kids if you have kids? Don't do that. Let people work at their own timeline and life unfold the way that it does. And a lot of times people struggle with letting people find their own space. So these were 4 great letters. I totally enjoyed it. Remember, you can do this too. All you have to do is just send me a virtual letter to getinspired@maya.com. So pretty much my final thoughts with these virtual letters. And the reason I wanted this to be the 50th episode, I'm sure that these burning questions that most people had resonated with somebody in some way. Though we are very unique creatures in our life and our habits, we share many commonalities that make the human experience richer. And I often find, I said it earlier, when you find you're not always walking a path alone, there may not be someone next to you, but someone can totally understand and empathize where you're coming from. It makes the journey a little less cumbersome when you open yourself up to, I'm not alone and struggling with getting to the best version of myself or always being happy. And that's good to know. It's not just me, because the world will make you think like you got to be happy all the time, and that's not real. So just know the struggle is real for everybody, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, professionally, the whole 9 yards. We all have the things that we struggle with, but don't be afraid to step into the light. This is what I tell people. Come out the shadows, step into the light and live your life to the fullest, because here's the thing. It's the only one you got at this moment, and it's the only one you're ever going to remember. So don't be afraid to take risks, and chances. Now, I'm not saying go out there and be silly. That's not what I'm saying. But don't be afraid to really explore what's going to make you happy, even if it might make somebody else unhappy. Some final thoughts from people. Michael Carson, thank you for tuning in. Congratulations, he says, on my 50th show. It's okay. Better late than never. And he said, whole truth to something I said. I appreciate it. So, hey, you know what? This is something that I have a passion about, and being consistent and always following through is something that's really important. So everybody, remember, I thank you for tuning in always. Remember, you can listen to episodes. As I said, the whole purpose of this podcast is to help you identify your passions, ambitions, and how to harness those things, that motivation to help you to acquire the success and satisfaction we seek, we seek in our everyday lives. Remember, you can find episodes of M.A.Y.A on multiple podcast platforms. Now, remember, I'm always going to tell you in my shameless self-promotion, go to maya.kai.com to listen to episodes. But also remember, you can go to Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Audibles. There's so many ways that you can actually listen to the show. So whatever it is, whatever your podcast platform of choice is, works for me. Just do me a favor. Just make sure you like, subscribe, and share, because maybe this episode did nothing for you, but it might do something for someone else. Speaking of this episode, if you go to mayakai.com and go to podcast resources, I have added a supplemental thing that I think will help you kind of put some framework around things that can make getting to the best version of you a little bit cumbersome. Some everyday things you can start to practice to help you to work on that best version of you. And of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Don't be shy. Go to M.A.Y.A on YouTube. You're going to go through a bunch of Japanese anime, and voila, I'm going to be right there. Click, subscribe, like, and share. As I always say to people, I appreciate anytime you like and subscribe and share anything that I do. Remember to get social with me on Twitter and Instagram, Maya_Akai, and of course, Facebook, M.A.Y.A Akai Presents. All right, everybody, that's it for episode 50. I went a little over today, but this was all about the virtual letters. Remember, send me a virtual letter. Drop me a virtual letter. All you have to do is email getinspired@mayakai.com, and I'll reach into the Maya virtual mailbag. And that question you might pose to me might be something I might just share at the beginning of an episode, or it might be so juicy and so burning. That sounded bad, juicy and burning. Anyways, my sick sense of humor. But it might be something that's solely worthy of an entire episode. I've done it before. Somebody posed something that legitimately I felt was worthy, and I gave it its just due. All right, everybody, until next time, you know what I always say. Remember, your present becomes your past, and at that moment, your future is no more. So live every single day to the fullest. Be well, stay safe, but more importantly, be amazing. Ciao.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A Akai and the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking, thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A on Twitter and Instagram at Maya_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A at MayaAkai.com.